Well, here we go. Another episode of UnAnchored Boston. Hi, everybody. With Bob Lobel, I'm Mike Lynch. And as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things in camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. And we are thrilled, as we always are, every time we have this guy on, Sean McAdam of MassLive.com. You knew him from the Herald of Pro Joe. He's as connected as anybody with Major League Baseball and the Red Sox, and we are thrilled to have him here today. And as always, to handle the formal introduction is our senior member of our staff, Bob Lobel.
Yeah. Thanks, I think. You're welcome, Sean. Chelmsford's the greatest and best alum that has really made it.
That's a crowded that's a crowded club for sports media coming out of Chelmsford, Bob, as you well know.
I know, but somebody's got to rise to the top, and you certainly have. I'll say that. You know what? Your book that came out, Boston, America's Greatest Sports Town, was it really America's greatest sports town back then, and is it still America's greatest sports town now?
Well, I think that evolves, depending on when you take the snapshot. But if we're looking at history, I would say that the city of Boston has done pretty well for itself over time, and particularly in this century. So even though we had a championship drought that lasted an entire 5 years, my God, how did we get through it? Yep. I think Boston can fairly stake that claim still.
Well, who would be the nearest competition? What do you think, Lynchy? What would be the nearest competition?
Well, you probably got to look at the cities with multiple major league teams, and new cities like New York and Los Angeles. But some cities like Detroit like to think because they got the University of Michigan there that counts, and we just count our professional teams. But since as far back since the turn of the century, nobody's even close.
Yeah, in terms of championship. If you're counting, and measuring merely by title, then it's Boston in a runaway. But it wasn't meant to necessarily only highlight, the last 25 years or so. It really was over time. And when you think about the great tradition in this town, and as Mike said, we're a pro sports town. I mean, it's kind of ironic, right, guys? I mean, the city with the most number of colleges and universities in its area has become more known for its pro sports. But then you start thinking about things like the marathon, the Head of the Charles, all kinds of the Beanpot, things that don't have anything to do with the Big Four as we know them. Then that just adds to the case, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I think you also have to include the original six in the National Hockey League. Those seem to be the, excluding Toronto and Montreal. I think it's Chicago, Detroit, Boston, New York, and there you are. Those are the four of the American six.
Right, and think of just about every franchise in the city is an original franchise for its league. The Patriots didn't come along until 1960, but that was the start of the AFL. They don't have the history that the Giants or Steelers or some other NFL franchises do, but they were a charter member of the AFL. Red Sox have been around forever. Bruins, an original six franchise. The Celtics go back to before the NBA was formed. So there's a lot of history there, as you would expect for a city like this.
That's interesting stuff. I mean, Philadelphia might think that they're part of the argument too, and the Flyers feel like an original six hockey team, but they don't.
Yeah, they were an original 12.
Yeah, yeah, they came back. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
No, Mike, please. You're the younger member of the staff.
You're the senior member of the staff here. Please.
Well, I was just going to switch the subject and ask Sean, do the Red Sox really don't suck as much as we thought they were going to?
Well, I guess it depends on when you're asking that question, right, Bob? I mean,
that's a great answer.
because it did not look good this weekend out in LA, that's for certain, nor did it look good in the first night in Denver. It's really their first rough patch here in almost 2 months. If you start measuring back from late May, early June, they had the best record in baseball for a long stretch. And predictably, I guess, they cooled off a little bit. A couple of those games out in LA were certainly winnable, probably should have been won. Red Sox were in control late in the game. The bullpen let them down. I suspect that's because of, a little bit of the buildup of the workload here. And I think it's kind of still undetermined what path they're going to take. We're less than a week out now from the Major League Baseball trade deadline, which arrives next Tuesday. And I think you can construct a case for them to take either path, buyer or seller. And we're already hearing reports that Craig Breslow is sort of preparing to do either one of them. And he's soliciting some interest from the guys that he might move if they decide to sell. Those would be players that are most likely on their final year of the contract and headed to free agency. Guys like Tyler O'Neill and Jansen and Nick Pivetta, Chris Martin. All four of those guys would qualify for that. You can do a lot of groundwork here and then pick your path in the last 24 hours. And I think it could well come down to that. It could depend on what they do here between today and next Monday. And then by Tuesday, you've got to make the call.
So, like, here we are. We're taping this on July 24th. I believe that one game out of the wild card spot. Is that right at this stage?
I think so, yes.
So I would think there'd be outrage around here if they weren't buyers, correct?
Well, except, Mike, if you look back on it, that's about where they've been the last 2 years. And I know people look back on that and say that they should have been buyers in 21 and 22 and 23 and weren't. But I suspect that Craig Breslow is going to look at this in a not very different way than did Chaim Bloom and ask, look at the math. And people get all up in arms when you talk about percentages and playoff chances and numbers like that. But I think you have to incorporate that information in your decision making. And I think you have to further ask, what are the chances that they can make a significant run if they do get into the postseason? Can they be the Diamondbacks of a year ago, a team that won, 80-something games and went all the way to the World Series? Can they be the Phillies of 2022 who got in at the very end as a wild card and got all the way to the World Series? Or are they going to be a team like Toronto last year that gets in and gets swept in the wild card round? So there's a lot of assessing, a lot of thinking to do here. And I'm sure that's being done over at Fenway Park.
I mean, all you have to do is get in the tournament, and anything can happen. So I think the objective is get in that tournament.
Well, in theory, yes, but I guess I would add, at what cost? If you're, if you're packaging a number of prospects for rentals or short-term answers, and the scenario that I portrayed with the Blue Jays and a few other teams last year who got in and then were gone before the end of the week, well, now you've sacrificed prospects and didn't win a postseason game. You've missed an opportunity to sell off some of your own free agents to be and further restock your prospect inventory for the future. And you're sitting there with no more wins in October than the 18 other teams that didn't qualify at all. So it isn't an either or. I think you have to do some assessing about what the team's potential is once you get in. Now, Craig Breslow may well think, hey, we just showed over 2 months how good we can be. We're just going through a rough stretch here that every team goes through. And he may think that it's worth going for it, as you put it, and hoping that you get hot at the right time in the postseason and can make a deep run. But the flip side to that is there are teams that go all in by Friday of that first week. So it's not as cut and dried as it might seem.
Let me throw this in. First of all, you need to get a stronger internet in Chelmsford. Oh, I'm just passing that. There's
Okay, I'm actually not in Chelmsford, Bob, but I'm not far off, so maybe we can blame my hometown.
no, that's all right. Listen, let's open this argument to a wider philosophical base of the chase for championships and the number of teams that are in the tournament, which expand from decade to decade at the whim of the owners. So it's a whole different structure when there used to be just the American League and the National League and two winners played for the World Series. So as the whole thing has evolved, the chase for the championship, as the present ownership, I'm just trying to get into the heads of the present ownership. As the chase for the championships evolve, it becomes a myth. The championship really is a straw horse, or is a goal that is basically fan oriented and will be wiped away in 12 months and another goal will be put in its place. It seems to be the psychological goal at any given time. It's not as important as people think it is what I'm trying to say. That the present ownership sees it for what it really is, and fans see it for what they want it to be. Does that make any sense at all? You can say
no. I know what you're saying. I think that fans have a passion. They're invested in how a team does on a daily basis. They live and die with the results. They're up until midnight and past that, watching games from the West Coast. They're all in. They want the team to go as far as possible and take a swing at another World Series. I think that both on the ownership level and certainly on the front office level, there's a different perspective, and it's driven by analytics. It's driven by data. It is not passion and emotion. It's cold, raw interpretation of the situation in front of them. And I would argue that was probably always the case. That even when we had 24 baseball teams and 12 in each league, and there was a American League champion and there was a National League champion, and they played a best of 7, and the team that won the World Series. I think there were even calculations back then from ownership and management about what the chances were of getting in there. There's always been that, I think, divide between fans who live and die with every game and every pitch and every inning, and management and ownership, which sees this a little more critically. But it's probably been highlighted by John Henry's detachment from the product, his comments to the Financial Times earlier this year, where he made it very cold and calculating, and that's not what fans want to hear. They want to hear that this is the same John Henry who back in 2004 was up at 4:00 in the morning writing emails about what went wrong in the previous night's game and unable to sleep. And I think fans are reasonably asking, what happened to that guy? And I think what happened to that guy is he has other toys to play with now. Not only Liverpool and Pittsburgh and other franchises, but his investment in the PGA has become, from what I'm told, the thing that he is most invested in, both literally and metaphorically, that it's the thing that he's most captivated by these days, and that his day-to-day emotional investment in the Red Sox is not what it was 20 years ago. And I think that is rather obvious if you spend any time around here.
But where is the guy? You remember this, Sean, when he showed up his first time and at the old training ground in Fort Myers in a bus, a Florida, and he ran the bases. Remember that? He ran the bases. He may have slid into home plate. I'm not sure, but it was one of the first fields on the right hand side as you're going down. And the guy was so accessible. I mean, anybody could talk to him one-on-one. You could walk and talk with a microphone. You could just walk and sit down next to him in the bleachers. And that guy is gone. He's not here anymore, and he's never coming back. And I think you have the same feeling we had with Jeremy Jacobs. It was an absentee owner. When he was the man behind the curtain. You never saw him, and that's what John Henry has morphed into, I think.
Yeah, I think he's actually at Fenway, Mike, more than most people would recognize, but he keeps his presence hidden. This is not Robert Kraft walking the sidelines and shaking hands with players while they're warming up for a 1:00 kickoff at Foxborough. John stays to himself. He watches the game from his suite. He is not in the clubhouse. He is not on the field during batting practice. He's a removed presence. And I think the larger issue is how involved and invested is he when he is around. I mean, I think there's a physical presence there. But as I said, from people I've spoken to, he is obsessed with his PGA investment. That's the thing that's driving him. He sees that as something that could really deliver for him financially down the road. And that's the shiny bauble now that occupies his time and passion that was once invested in the Red Sox.
Does he want to have the biggest sports empire on the planet?
It's certainly
he's not that far away.
Yeah, Fenway Sports Group is a hugely successful enterprise. They have their tentacles in baseball, hockey, NASCAR racing, golf, soccer. There are rumors, as you know, about their interest in trying to buy an NBA team, whether that be the Celtics locally now that they're for sale, or an expansion franchise that they could put in Las Vegas. I think it's going to be difficult because of some of the rules that the NFL has about ownership and owning other franchises and other sports for them to delve into the NFL. But could they create some spinoff or shell company that could do that? Probably. I'm not nearly smart enough to figure that stuff out, nor rich enough to hang out with those people. But clearly, this is an expanding enterprise and empire that has international tentacles with different sports all over the world, whether it be soccer or golf, that are more international than baseball is. And it keeps growing. So you'd be hard pressed to say that that's not in the back of his mind, his ultimate goal.
Well, I know at least the feeling getting back to the Red Sox and the relationship.
What is a straw horse, Bob? We were talking before.
I'll give you an example. Like, what determines whether you're going to be a buyer or a seller the week before the deadline, which is where we are. And I'm watching a game against the Dodgers, the game that was a great game, but we're in the 11th or 12th inning, and it's all determined by the ghost runner. That all of a sudden a ghost runner, a stupid ghost runner rule put in to make the games go faster, can determine whether a team is going to be a buyer or a seller, and can determine a team's future. And that's what I'm saying, Mike. That the things like that, the gimmicks like that can really change the whole outlook of the franchise, depending on the result of a game like that. Because you're in now, as Sean said, they could have won 2 of those 4 games in LA, and the whole outlook would have been much different going into the trade deadline.
Well, that's true, but I would counter Bob by saying then don't blow the lead in the 8th inning that you have and put yourself in extra innings and make yourself subjected to the whims of the ghost runner. I'm not a huge fan of that, although as someone who has no interest in being there until 2:00 in the morning for a 17-inning game anymore, anything that speeds the process along is okay by me. But from a competitive standpoint, I understand what you're saying, that, that's kind of a rather radical rule change that really changes strategy once you get into extra innings. The funny thing is that it was introduced to kind of make sure that we don't have the super long extra inning games that wear down a pitching staff, maybe create injuries long term. And the last, I think, 3 extra inning games that the Red Sox have played have all gone 11 or 12 innings because they've been unable to settle it in the 10th when most extra inning games are settled now.
Sean, let me ask you, I haven't been to the ballpark in a couple of years. Bob and I both retired, and when we would go every night, there was a buzz there. I mean, there would be probably 80% people really cared about, they want to take 3 out of 4 from the Orioles, but there was that 20% that didn't care if they were playing Chelmsford Little League. They were just coming because it was an event. It was a tourist attraction. Has that makeup changed in the last couple of years when mediocrity is set in with the ball club?
I think it has changed, Mike, but I'm not sure it's necessarily tied to the product on the field. I think it's the changing nature of sports. The Red Sox are very interested in filling the ballpark with whomever wants to buy a ticket. They're not demanding long-term fandom. They're not going to give you a trivia quiz about who played third base or who was the starting second baseman for the Red Sox in 1967. Reggie Smith, of course, we all know that.
You beat me to it, Sean.
It's about marketing the game to a varied fan base. So yes, you're going to have your hardcores, people like us who, got taken to the ballpark by our dads or grandparents the first time, caught the bug as young fans and continue to enjoy baseball and go back and enjoy watching games there. But they're also marketing to out-of-town fans. They're marketing toward groups. They're marketing toward college kids, right? They had the $9 tickets a few years ago to try to expand baseball's demographics. We know that baseball skews older than the other sports, that research tells us that 8 and 10 and 12 and 15-year-olds are not as enamored of baseball as they were when we were all growing up. Those kids enjoy the NBA more. They enjoy playing and watching soccer more. So they did a smart thing, I think, in making from a business standpoint, making $9 tickets available for college students as a place to come get your Friday night started. The game's over at 10 o'clock. You can still walk down Lansdowne Street and go in the clubs later and dance and drink and meet up with friends. But start your night at the ballpark. Have a couple of drinks in the bleachers. Be outside on a nice summer night. Enjoy the evening. And then go with your friends to your next stop.
Remember those days, Mike?
Yeah, I remember them well. Are they over?
I think that, that they are mindful that you in a crowded sports marketplace that you cannot solely depend on hardcore baseball fans to buy 37,500 tickets every night. So they are selling the Fenway experience. They're trying to introduce the game to high school and college kids so that they become fans for life, and they teach their kids to become fans for life. It's a much more complicated marketing approach than it was when, 30 or 40 years ago, when they put tickets on sale, opened the ticket windows, stood back and counted the money. It's a more competitive marketplace. There are more things for young people to do. There are alternative options. It's a different society than it was, in the 70s or 80s, when it was, at 4:00. Tion's pitching. Let's go over to the ballpark and buy a ticket and walk in. People aren't like that anymore.
Let me ask both of you guys about the broadcasts of these games these days, and for the Fenway Sports Group, the employees of Nesson and the Fenway Sports Group and WEEI. Do you get the sense that the broadcasters have become like car salesmen? Like what they're trying to do is sell the Red Sox as opposed to describing baseball? I get the feeling, and that whole attitude has changed, that they'll do anything to make a positive comment about a negative situation, to just kind of expand the example.
Well, I think over time, whether you went back and talked about Nick Stockton or Ned Martin or Ken Coleman or whatever TV voices we grew up with in the market, look, the local broadcast is always going to pull for the local team. The supposition is that if you're watching, you want the home team to do well, and so do the guys behind the mic. The problem comes when you start trying to tell people that they're seeing something other than what they're actually seeing. So it's one thing to be invested in the team doing well and be excited when there's a 2-run homer or a stolen base or a great defensive play. When you start trying to make excuses for what's going on, or try to convince people that, what they're seeing is not what they're seeing, that's when you get into trouble. And I don't see a lot of that, frankly, on the local broadcast, but I do recognize that it is more of they're not as caught up in every single pitch. It's a more relaxed presentation. They're trying to have some fun with the color guys. They're being a little more casual in their presentation, but I would say that's probably going on in every city and with other sports too. Again, it's the crowded marketplace in which we live, where you have a million different options every night. You can watch any game, anytime, anywhere. If you want to pay for the extra innings package, you can do the same for the NHL, NBA, and NFL. You can watch soccer. You can play video games. You can do all kinds of stuff online. So they have to capture people and keep them there. And I think they've decided that a more broad approach, where they're not invested in every single pitch, but they're talking about some stuff off the field. They're trying to inject a little personality. They've got players mic'd up in the middle of games, and which some people like and other people don't. Some people, maybe our generation, feels that that's distracting, that I don't want to have the center fielder jabbering away with the color guy when he's chasing a fly ball to the triangle. You want them, paying attention to what's going on the field, not answering questions while they backpedal. But again, it's more the entertainment value and the balls and strikes that we grew up watching. that sort of approach is probably not coming back.
I kind of like the in-game interviews because, I mean, I think it's what are the chances of the ball being hit to the guy that you're interviewing? It's the one
I
on.
disagree, Michael. I totally disagree. But that's what I want you to know. Yeah, I mean, go ahead. But go ahead. I want to hear.
I want to know what you're thinking. Oh, I got to get on my horse. Going. Oh, I got to cut this one off here to make sure it's not a 3-bagger. It's only a 2-bagger. I kind of like that. That doesn't bother me. As for the broadcast, I still think it to me it feels like a 2 or 3 year audition to fill the place of a Jerry Remy, a Dennis Eckersley. We're looking for the next Martin and Woods in the radio booth, and I still feel like that is an audition for me every single night when I'm watching. Well, is this guy going to be here next week? Is he going to be here in the Yankee series?
Yeah, and I think in general, you don't have the longevity of those guys that we saw forever. I mean, Ken Coleman's association with the team spanned decades. So did Ned Martin. Then for a long time, Sean McDonough, and then for a long time, Don Orsillo. Dave O'Brien's been, the guy now for 8 or 9 years, but due to health issues and decision to retire, it has been kind of a revolving door. But I can tell you that in most cities, that's also the case now. Watch the Yankees, and you're going to get Michael Kay on the call on the Yes Network, but is he going to be with Paul O'Neill, or is it going to be David Cohn, or is it going to be John Flaherty, or is it going to be Ken Singleton, or is it going to be whoever? There isn't that. Oh, there's 2 guys. It's Martin and Woods. It's Coleman and Martin. It's whatever, or Orsillo and Remy. That permanency no longer exists really in broadcasting. Whether it's guys not wanting to commit to full-term seasons and do 150 games, or whether it's a decision by management to mix it up a little bit so that you get different perspectives. But I think a little is lost in not having that continuity on a nightly basis, because baseball, the rhythm of the game is such that it's every day, and there's a sameness to it, a familiarity, and you don't have that familiarity on the broadcasts.
Yeah, because there's like Johnny Most or Harry Carey or these guys, or Chick Hearn, they were parts of the team.
Yep.
They were as much a part of the team as the starting pitcher or the catcher or whatever, and they were part of the experience. And I think when you're talking about the auditions, it's like, okay, I did enjoy Millar and Euclid doing a kind of a song and dance thing about Cincinnati and joking around. It was good baseball talk, inside baseball talk. But on the other hand, when they get overly gushing about Duran's ability to run, and if you're not a baseball fan, you don't like Ref Snyder or whatever. I'm just saying it gets a little tiresome, but that's just me. Here's what I think about the in-game interviews, Mike, and this is why I disagree. I just think it's one of those. It is a gimmick. It's because they have the technology. Because we have it, we're going to use it. We're going to show it. It's more about the ability to have that technology and to show it off, that we can be part of the team. We can be on the field with these guys instead of up here watching these guys. We can be next to them, talking to them. And to me, that's intrusive. To me, it's intrusive into the game. But that's my own personal hang up about that. It's because we have it, we use it. Okay, now you're going to say, so what, Lobel? No.
Well, I think, you have to take into account the many different ways that people, here's a 21st century broadcast term, consume games these days.
Ooh, I like that, Sean. Consume the games.
Right? They're watching on their phone. They're watching on their iPad. They've recorded it on their, DVR, and they're watching it hours after it happened. They're fast forwarding through.
Well, like the Red Sox in 2. That is the most ridiculous. Please, it ought to be the Red Sox in 2 minutes, not 2 hours.
Yeah, well, there are some people who do it that way too.
I'm just saying, it's after as we have the talent, we have the ability. Why not redo it and resell it and repackage it?
You may have noticed, Bob, that younger fans do not quite have the patience and the attention span that us old folks have. And they don't have as much. They may have a lot of leisure time, but they're not spending it with 2 hours and 42 minutes watching every single pitch.
Yeah, that's why the fast moving sports that are going to be over in 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's why they sell. And they
like
do.
Football, the NFL is a perfect TV package because it fits. It fits into a time period.
Right, and it's once a week. It doesn't demand that
Well,
daily.
it's not like 4 times a week.
Well, but your local team plays once a week. So if you're a Patriots fan, you have a 3-hour window to watch them once a week, instead of baseball, which asks of you, 2 hours and 30 or 40 or 50 minutes, 6 or 7 times a week. That's a big difference.
It is.
Is the pitch clock the greatest invention of the last quarter century or longer?
You'll find no argument for me, Mike. I think, again, from a selfish reason, so that we're not playing 3 hours and 40 minutes when the Yankees are in town. I think it's a better product. The game had gotten away from everyone, and the notion that there had to be, 45 seconds in between pitches every time as guys step out and adjust their batting gloves and take a practice swing and adjust their helmet and then step back in and call time. I mean, it really had become ridiculous. The funny thing was the players were completely unaware of that. When baseball made the push to introduce the pitch clock, players were legitimately asking, why? What's the problem? Because they had become so accustomed to taking their time, it didn't feel like it had slowed down for them. But it makes a tremendous amount in the pacing. People are like, they're manufacturing this and they're instituting all these changes, and it's not the game that we once knew. No, they're trying to get back to the game that you knew. And I'm not talking about the 40s and 50s. I'm talking about as recently as, the 80s and early 90s, when you could still get a game reasonably played in 2 hours and 30 minutes. The fact that, and Bud Selig, who had his faults, certainly, but looking at this issue, he once said, it's the difference between time of game and pace of game. And that it was okay for you to have a 3 hour and 15 minute 8-7 game, but you should not, under any circumstances, have a 2-1 game that took 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Right.
And that's where we had gotten. And I think that we've now kind of put the genie back in the bottle, and the game moves at a good pace. No one should feel hurried. Players are such creatures of habit that they swore that this was going to be the end of baseball as we know it, to only have 20 seconds with nobody on base and 17 seconds.
Oh, for Nomar, it might have been for Nomar. Nomar never would have been able to. I mean, come on.
It's funny. I saw Nomar out in L.A. this past weekend and spoke to him, and have a story coming about Nomar tomorrow, and a shameless plug on MassLive.com.
Oh, good.
He became the poster child of the players that adjusted their gloves, stepped out after every pitch, and then it became commonplace. And now we're kind of getting back to where we were before that, which I think is.
This is for Mass Live, for the Nomar on Mass Live.
Yes,
MassLive.com.
So did No More have a piece of tape in front of him so you couldn't cross the line?
There was no red line that I could not cross, Bob. I'm happy to report. It was a very cordial interview outside the LA Sportsnet broadcast booth in Dodger Stadium, and I can tell you that he's a much more relaxed guy than he was during his playing days.
And I hope so.
Yep.
Yeah, he was not a pleasant guy to deal with.
He could be challenging at times. As someone who covered those teams on a daily basis, I will not argue that point.
Well, let me say something about challenging and campers, okay? Can I just morph into this for a second?
Sure. Like only you can do, Bob. Like only you can do.
Only I can do campers or non-campers. If you're not a camper, great, but you might be thinking about a new RV, recreational vehicle, RV. Our friends at Cold Springs RV are ready for you. They've always been ready for you, but now they're really ready for you because they know what ready for you means, but now they've taken it up to another example. There's a pitch clock out there. So go see the latest in travel trailers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, pop-ups. I'm not sure if somebody asked me, Bob, what's a pop-up? I'm not sure I could tell you, except it must be something that pops up. That's all I can say. And then more. They have the best selection.
Kent State. That's Kent State for you right there.
What? The pop-up?
Yeah, you went to Kent State, so you got a very sharp mind, and you pick up on things.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Coming from a Harvard guy, that's really...
Oh, just observation.
Well, thank you. I'll just get back to the subject I'm talking about right now. The doors are always open, okay? They have no pressure, a free pressure environment. Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. And you're going to ask, where? Yes, it's in New Hampshire. It's west of Goffstown and north of Tingsboro. Okay? The great town of Tingsboro, which is right next to Chelmsford.
That's right.
Weren't you guys like rivals, Sean?
Bill Ricca was our rival in Chelmsford.
Okay, right. Tingsboro, I guess it was Notre Dame Academy.
Yes.
Big rivals. Big rivals. Chelmsford would wear all maroon helmets, maroon jerseys, maroon pants. And then they go over to Bill Ricker and they play at the middle school. That's where the football field
was. Can I finish this, Mike? I know I
thought you were done.
I know that it's good to reminisce on this.
Yeah, you're a slow reader. I understand.
Maroon camper. If you really want a maroon camper that had a big C on it, you get one.
We can have one made for Sean if we'd like.
Yes,
right?
Can I just finish what I'm just saying?
Keep going, Bob.
Okay. Or check them out online at coldspringsrv.com. All right, I'm done. No.
Imagine if we had to read commercials on Channel 4, Channel 5. The whole sportscast would be gone by the time each one of us finished.
It would be now because they only get a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steve Burton. Thanks for joining us. See ya. Okay. I am Duke Castiglione. My name wasn't so long, you might get some sports.
We had short names, so that helped.
No, it didn't hurt. All right, 5-letter names.
All right, so we did this before with you, Sean. You know what's coming up. John Madden had a Madden cruiser because he didn't like to fly. So Cold Springs RV is in the process of making a Lobel Lynchy cruiser to drive across the country.
Yep.
And since we don't have any money to pay our guests.
No, or the host either, for that matter. So
once we finally have the Lobel cruiser, Lynchy cruiser, like the way I threw the Lynchy in there, it used to be the Lobel cruiser.
I know. I've noticed it crept in over the past month or so, but I didn't say anything. Have I said anything about it?
You just did.
I know, but you brought it up because you said it used to be just a Lobel cruiser, but I
wanted to make it more inclusive.
I wouldn't have said anything if you hadn't just brought it up. Okay.
All right, so Sean, we're going to give you the Lobel Lynchy cruiser to borrow for a week, and you get to drive from here to the West Coast and fly you back. You can take anybody you want riding shotgun with you, someone you want to have a conversation with, somebody you just want to listen to, somebody that you think you'd have an interesting time with driving cross country.
It
can be alive, can be deceased, doesn't matter. What'd you say, Lobel?
I said present company excluded.
Right. Nobody, by the way, Sean, nobody has picked either one of us.
Are you dropping a hint here, Mike, that maybe
No.
I become the first?
No, because you wouldn't be real, wouldn't be truthful. Then we want nothing but truth.
It'd be like a straw cowboy or whatever you call it. All right, Sean, who would it be? Who would you like to ride shotgun with? It could be someone deceased, someone, non-sports, anybody.
Oh boy. I think last time I said Pedro. That he would remain on the short list. I find him a fascinating person who is so intelligent and can, his baseball acumen is obvious for anybody who's ever spent 10 seconds with him. But I think he's had such a remarkable career and experiences all over the world. I would put, I guess if we could do 3/4 of a Mount Rushmore, and that's probably a pretty big SUV. I can squeeze 3 people in and cheat. It would probably be Bobby Orr, Pedro Martinez, and Ted Williams. If we're talking about fascinating, and let's throw Bill Russell in as a fourth. I would, just listening to him talk about winning, Ted Williams talk about his passion for hitting, Pedro about pitching, and Bobby Orr about hockey and the Big Bad Bruins. Those would be my 4. I know you asked for 1, but I'm cheating.
That's why we have a Lobel. That's why we have a Lobel Lynchy cruiser, because it's bigger now. More people in it.
There you go.
Right, it's a motorhome. It's really, now this would be a motorhome.
Right, Bob?
You may have to. You may have to hit the West Coast, Sean, and drive all the way back and fly.
Yeah, I might refuse the flight back and say I want to turn around and keep the 4 of them going.
You might get here faster.
Having done exactly that yesterday, I can attest to that.
Now that you've gone and talked about Pedro, because we can go anywhere with our conversation, because that's what we are. We can do whatever we want to do. I'm just thinking about landmark games, individual games that would live in your memory. I can think of 2, but I could be excluding 1, but I just would be interested in both of you that might have landmark games that you might remember.
Involving Pedro or anybody?
Just involving the team, and maybe even involving Pedro, but involving the Red Sox.
When you think about Pedro and his time in Boston, I would guess that a majority of people would point to the Chili Davis game, right? The one in September of '99 or 2000, or maybe it was. If it's such a landmark, I should probably know the year, but it was a September game in Yankee Stadium where Pedro pitched a complete game, gave up only 1 hit. That was a solo homer to Chili Davis. I think struck out 17. That was Pedro at his absolute height of his powers. Toying with hitters. Gave up. I think we put so much emphasis on the fact that people say, "Oh, Pedro never threw a no hitter, never threw a perfect game." There are lots of no hitters and perfect games that aren't as well pitched as that game. Yeah, he made a mistake to Chili Davis, who hit it out. It didn't matter. It was 1 run. The Red Sox easily won the game. But that was a Yankee lineup that was full of future Hall of Famers. It was in hostile territory in the Bronx. It was Red Sox, Yankees, and Pedro toyed with the other 8 guys, and frankly toyed with Chili Davis and his other.
Red Sox were his daddy.
Yeah, right.
That
would be on a short list of games that I've covered that I remember. Certainly involving Pedro Martinez, but Pedro was never anything less than captivating to watch and then talk to after the game. That was, that the as captivating as he was on the mound and as brilliant as he was and as fun as he was to watch, and you got the opportunity to talk to him after, and that could become every bit as educational and entertaining as what you had just seen him do between the lines.
No, I think you're right. The one I remember, Sean, was I think he came out on relief in Cleveland in the playoffs.
Yep.
Was it five innings of no-hit baseball?
Six. Yeah.
5+, yeah. To me, that was like, wow, what are they doing? They're bringing him up, and they're bringing him up for another inning, and another inning, and another inning.
I would pick that number 2, Mike. It's funny you mentioned that game. I was there, and I remember 2 things about that game. That the Indians, if you remember, the first few innings of that game were like, it was like watching Hagler Hearns between 2 baseball teams. It was, Indians would go up 2-0, Red Sox went up 3-2, Indians would come back. It was like, I don't know, it was like 6-5 already after 3 innings. And the Indians had taken the lead. And I remember how confident the fans were at then Jacobs Field. And then I remember the bullpen door opening and Pedro coming out, and you could hear a pin drop in that place because it was like, uh-oh. Even though he had the shoulder issue and everyone knew he wasn't 100%, those fans in Cleveland wanted nothing to do with Pedro Martinez in a game of that magnitude. And I'll tell you the other thing that is etched in my mind about that game. Pedro was jogging in as relaxed as he would have been if this were a spring training game in Clearwater, Florida in mid-March. And when he got to the infield dirt, he walked past Durwood Merrill, who was the second base umpire. Remember, Durwood had kind of a gut on him. Pedro went over and rubbed Durwood Merrill's stomach for good luck, like it was nothing, like this wasn't do or die for the Red Sox. And he was some good luck Buddha charm that Pedro had walked by on his way to the mound. I've never seen that on the field before. I've never seen a player go over and rub the belly of an umpire working that game, but that was Pedro.
Yeah, those were great moments, and he was like Larry Bird. I mean, when Bird was playing, you had to watch every single game.
Right.
Pedro only pitched every 5th day, but when he was pitching, it didn't. West Coast didn't matter. You just
appointment viewing.
Yes, you're right. You altered whatever you were doing that night. You changed it because you had to watch every single pitch.
Don't forget the All-Star game.
That's my number 2. That's my number 2. And struck out 5 out of 6, right?
It wasn't a full game, but it kind of was a full. In a way, it was a full game.
Yeah, I think a lot. If they had canceled the game after the top of the second, I think a lot of people, between watching the Ted Williams thing on the mound before the game and seeing Pedro at his absolute height of his powers, just cut through the National League lineup like a hot knife through butter. If they had said, "That's it, folks," nobody would have complained.
Right? And we're not talking about chumps in that lineup.
Already had gotten your money's worth if they had called the game in the middle of the second inning.
Yeah, and don't forget the names of the players that he had to go through. When we're talking at the height of the Sosa, McGuire,
Bagwell, maybe Rafael Palmeiro. I don't know. Trying to think of he wouldn't have been in the National League then, but I mean, just the biggest names in the sport, and Pedro made them look like children.
And that was after we introduced the greatest the players of the All-Century team.
Right.
What a night! I'm not sure if there has been or ever will be an All-Star game that will match that.
Yeah, and this is the 25th anniversary of it this month.
Yeah.
It seems in many ways it seems like yesterday, and in many ways it seems much longer ago than 25 years.
Yeah, like all of us, we all had a chance to buy some tickets, and I got 2 seats out in right field, and invited my dad and my brother, and they were in the paid seats, and then I was up in the, but I came down. I was like sort of crouching down in the aisle, just sitting with them. When Al Forrester drove Ted around the corner. I mean, I had goosebumps. And my dad, I could see my dad. Like he had like almost him standing up clapping. He had almost tears in his eye.
Yep.
And then we had the home run derby contest the night before,
right,
which was epic. Epic. Out in the street. Two nights I will never forget. Never forget.
Yeah, that's good. That's what baseball used to be able to create. And I think that's not, well, I shouldn't say that because it hasn't happened yet, but it hasn't happened again. And I guess,
I don't. That's the important. That's why it meant so much to us, because it happened here. It didn't happen in Seattle, didn't happen in Washington, didn't happen in St. Louis. It happened here. And that's why it was so special. It happened in Fenway, and we're
back to Sean's Boston's greatest sports town.
Yeah, but I mean, it happened in a city where there are generation after generation after generation.
Yeah, there's history and legacy here that maybe this sounds kind of East Coast elitist on our part, but it's hard to think that would have the same impact and magnitude if it were to happen in Arlington, Texas, or San Diego, California.
Yeah.
Well, here you are 25 years later, and you still have the same feelings about it that you had 25 years ago.
Yeah.
That's pretty enduring. You can't say that about a whole lot of things.
Well, right, and that's the magic of sports, is that it makes us feel young again. Those memories warm us a quarter of a century later. And Mike thinks about his dad being at that game and his brother, and the through line from generation to generation. And that's that connective tissue that sports offers us that not a lot of other things in life do.
Well, it's a great way to end the whole opportunity to have you on, Sean, today. That was really, you haven't talked a lot about the Red Sox for good reason, because most people didn't know who was playing first base or who was playing second base or whether they could even play it. So it's been an educational season for a lot of people, just trying to learn the names of the players that are at the various positions, as you know.
Yeah.
I think he was at the game at night. Let me get this spot in before we had some other thoughts. Hey, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Matter of fact, my wife is driving a George Gray Lexington Toyota RAV4 right now as we speak. Go see the big wheel, we call him, George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. I'm pretty sure George was at Fenway Park that night in 1999, and he shared in that great experience that we all shared in as well. Okay, go ahead, continue on, Bob and Sean.
Well, I think that it's a good place to wrap up the whole conversation, because we haven't talked hardly at all about the Red Sox. Well, the point is, we haven't talked at all about the Red Sox this year, because there hasn't been much to talk about, because we ourselves playing first base.
Well, yeah, it may not be a star-filled team or roster or any addition of the Red Sox that someone else is going to be talking about in 25 years, but the fact that they've been a pleasant surprise, and I think been, the past weekend notwithstanding, they've been a lot better than what people had anticipated back in March or April, myself included. I had them for 83 wins, so above 500. I think it's pretty obvious or likely that they get there and finish with a winning record. What they do with that and whether it propels them into the postseason and remains to be seen. But a year like this is a reminder that the great unknown is part of our love affair with sports, that teams can surprise you and play better than you anticipated and kind of draw you in a little bit. And maybe this isn't the year that they get back and do something and have a magic October, but it could be a building block toward one of those years.
Let me ask you this question. You're taking your nephew, your grandson, your granddaughter to a Red Sox game. You got a fistful of money in your pocket, and you said, come on, let's go into the pro shop, and you can buy any Red Sox jersey you want from someone on this team, other than Rafael Devers. You think the kids would be able to identify which player they would want to buy?
Yeah, maybe not, Mike. That's a good question. I mean, a lot of these young guys are still establishing themselves, whether it's Casas or I would say Duran is starting to become every bit the star that Devers is on this team. It's an exciting brand of play with 11 triples and 25 stolen bases, and he's on pace to hit more than 20 homers. That's the guy that could become a future star if he's not already. He was not only an all-star last week, but the MVP of the all-star game. So that's a good start. And you've got Tanner Houck taking a big step forward as a true number one in that rotation. So as I said, there are building blocks that are starting to become evident, but the whole structure isn't built yet.
I think at one point, to root for this team was a positive vote for ownership. And that was a conflict for a lot of fans. So it was a conflict for me, because if I felt this team succeeded, then I would have thought that the present ownership succeeded in their philosophy about building the club. So I kind of had the opinion that the better this team did, the worse it was going to be for the fans in the long run, because of it just reflected the fact that the ownership was right, that Full Throttle really was, a 500. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, but I think you're overthinking. I think you're overthinking it, Bob. I don't think it has to be some either or. Part of sports for all of us has been the competition and the unknown and the unpredictable and sitting back and watching what happens. I don't think we have to necessarily, if they have an exciting comeback win, I don't think we have to quantify it by saying, well, but this is putting more money in John Henry's pocket, or this is making Tom Warner look like he was some kind of prophet. I think you enjoy the game in front of you and let the other stuff drift away for a couple of hours.
Well said.
Sean, that's why I had you nicknamed as Gandhi when we were on television together. You remember those days, right?
That and this, right?
Yeah, this was my nickname for him, that he was Gandhi.
Pretty good. Thanks.
Because of wisdom, like the last piece that he offered. Well, thanks, Sean. You did a great job today, as usual. I mean, really, it was very stimulating and very interesting.
Guys, it's always a lot of fun to talk sports with the both of you. I feel about both of you, and I'm privileged and honored when you ask me to come on. I always enjoy it.
And the feeling's mutual, Sean. Let me tell you it is. Nobody more connected to baseball and the Red Sox than you are. All right, folks, thanks again for watching us, and make sure you follow us on UnAnchoredBoston.com.